What's up, guys? It is Ben with Ben's Election Predictions, and today is the day. Today is 2025 Election Day for the New York City mayor race, the New Jersey governor's race, the Virginia governor's race, and the Virginia attorney general's race. I'm going to cover all four of those races. I'm going to give you my margin, I'm going to give you my reasoning, I'm going to give you my projected total vote share. So let's just get started here. As you can see on the left-hand side, these are all of my projections that I will go into further detail. I think that Mamdani will get 52% and win by 15. I think that Mikie Sherrill over in New Jersey will get 52% of the vote, like Mamdani. Obviously completely different races, and I think she's going to win by 6 percentage points. I think that in the Virginia governor's race, that Abigail Spanberger will win by 13 points with 56% of the vote. If you do the math there, that's a 14-point margin, but with rounding, that's how I see it. And the closest race I think of the 2025 election cycle will be the Virginia Attorney General's race. I do think that Jay Jones will end up winning this race by 2 points. So let's kind of dive into the overall reasonings, because I do think these races are incredibly correlated. And then I will go into each race and kind of give you my logic and why I feel pretty confident about my projections here. Okay, so I broke this kind of down into three main reasons. So in my overall thesis points is that the Democrats will overperform and not to overthink this race. A lot of times the week before a race, there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of speculation, there's a lot of October, November surprises that come out that make people rethink the race. I've been thinking this thesis for a while. It's 2025. We have Trump as president. Even though he's, some people might say he's a little bit more popular in his second term, he has the same exact approval ratings as in his first term. The government shut down. Most people in polls blame the Republicans. There's been a number of other kind of unpopular Trump policies, but overall, I just think the political environment favors the Democrats. The Republicans control the entire government, the presidency, the House, and the Senate. And Trump, despite winning in 2024 by the biggest margin that he has ever won in, his coalition is kind of falling apart. Whether it was his increases with minority voters or his overperformance among young voters or the whole Make America Healthy Again movement. And New Jersey, Virginia, in New York City, I'm obviously going to have different projections because each of those states are different to the extent of what their demographics are, what their political affiliation, and some local kind of state race dynamics. But these are all blue states. So when I keep on going back to my core thesis of the Democrats will overperform and don't overthink this. These are blue states in a blue, more favorable environment. And this kind of gets to my second point here. So in off-cycle elections, now they favor the Democrats. This wasn't always the case. If we go back to 2010, if we go back to 2014 when President Obama was president, Republicans tended to be the high propensity voting party, and the Democrats were more of the low propensity voters, which caused Obama to win in a historic landslide in 2008 and to win again in 2012. Now it is totally flipped. So the Republicans did pretty well in 2016, and despite losing in 2020, Trump was running up the margins there. And in 2024, it was a great year for the Republicans. Typically, we see that kind of flip back and forth. And so I view, 2017 was a very good year for Democrats, whether we're looking at the Virginia governor's race, the New Jersey governor's race, or even, the New York City mayor's race. But I think this dynamic of the Republicans being more of the low propensity voters and the Democrats being more of the high propensity voting party, this trend has gotten exacerbated in 2025. So this dynamic applies even more in 2025 than it did in 2017. And 2017 was still a very good year for the Democrats. The last point is here is just trusting the high quality polls. And I will get into this on my next slide when I kind of, dive into, what are those polls. But in 2016, 2020, and 2024, there was this huge narrative that, the polling industry is dead. They cannot capture the hidden Trump voter. And I think that that is true. Like these polls like Trafalgar, even Atlas Intel, they did very well. They were able to capture this neighbor vote phenomenon, the shy Trump voter effect, and the high quality polls just weren't able to match that, and they got it wrong, and they deserve criticism, I think. However, if we look in the off-cycle races in the Trump era, and we've been in the Trump era for 10 years, so we have a lot of historical record on this. In 2017, in 2018, in 2019, in 2021, in 2022, the high quality polls were spot on. And if we look at the high quality polls now, the average of them, and I'm more referring to the New Jersey governor's race, the polling averages at the high quality polls are outside the margin of error. So even if the polls are wrong within their margin of error, which sometimes it happens that they're wrong outside the margin of error, we still get a Democratic sweep. And yeah, and the polls are showing, and I guess I kind of had the same point here, but the polls are even worse for the Republicans than they were in 2017. So I have these two pictures on the side. I have a broom for the Democratic sweep, but it's similar to kind of like a blue wave. Though we only have 3 elections to look at, and I think the core thesis of this race is Trump is president, and there typically is a backlash effect when that happens. So let's dive into the core races here. So first, I wanted to look at the New York City mayor's race, and my final prediction is Mamdani to get. This is actively changing for me. Mamdani gets 53% of the vote. Cuomo at that 36-37. The main person I was looking at is Michael Lange, and he's far smarter than I am, far more well known than me. I had a tweet that went semi-viral that said that he knows ball, but he does. I read his entire report. I didn't even understand part of it, but he was literally projecting the vote by street corner. This guy is detailed. If we look at the current odds, it's about a 90-10 race. If we look at the polls, it's not particularly close. This one's actually a bit of a funny one where the higher quality pollsters actually have this being a tighter race than some of the other ones. But and you can see that I kind of copied Michael Lang's projections, but he should just view that as flattery, because I think he's very smart. I could, try to come up with my own model, but I'm typically more of a qualitative election forecaster. So when I see someone that's good and it makes sense kind of what he's saying in my head, and this was also fairly similar to what I was saying too, but the reason why my final projection is a bit different from the polls is I think that there's, and this is my point number 2, I think there's a late break towards there's a late break towards Cuomo. There's a typo here, away from Sliwell. We saw Trump going on 60 Minutes and say that he's encouraging his supporters to vote for Cuomo. So that's why I think if we look at the polling averages here, we see Sliwell is at 18 or Sliwell is at 16. The polls are not going to capture this late break phenomenon. There was a lot of speculation that he would drop out. He didn't drop out, but he's DOA. There's no chance that he's going to win. So I actually do think voters, Republican voters, independent voters, are pretty savvy, and the anti-Mamdani coalition, for the most part, is going all in on Cuomo. One interesting dynamic in this race is we are going to see high turnout. In 2017 and 2021, we saw a little bit over 1 million voters. I think we're going to get closer to 2 million. I even think 2.1 or 2.2 might be the right number. And people are saying like, oh, this is going to help Cuomo. This is going to help Mamdani. I actually don't think it's going to change the margins that much from like what the polls have it at, but high turnout ensures a Mamdani victory because he just has such a lead in the polls. And so how I'm kind of, handicapping this race towards the end is I'm taking the high quality polls and I'm allocating the undecideds to Mamdani and Cuomo. And then I'm also taking a bit of a haircut on Sliwa because I think there's some people that responded to the pollster saying that they would vote for Sliwa, but when they get in the voting booth, they're going to end up voting for Cuomo. And, there's been this narrative that can Cuomo pull a huge upset here? From what I've seen, Mamdani is getting his voters to the polls. If you look at the early voting data, he's doing exactly what he needs to do. He might underperform a little bit from what he did in the primary, but I do think he's going to hit that 52 or 53% mark. Next up, I want to focus on the New Jersey's governor's race. In some ways, I think this is the most interesting race because it's going to be the most competitive, besides the Virginia Attorney General's race, which is a down ballot race. So if we look at the historicals here, in 2017, which I think is kind of the best corollary because that's when, Trump was president in his first term. It was an off-cycle Trump presidency election. We can see that was a landslide of sorts. That was Phil Murphy during his first term, and it was a 56-42 race. In 2021, New Jersey was on no one's radar. This was a state that Biden won by around 10 points. It's seen as a blue state. And Jack, who's the Republican candidate, overperformed the polls by around 6 points. And so if you are just taking that at base value, that, Jack always overperforms the his polls, that's why some people are saying that this is going to be an upset. I don't think so. The second point on why some people think this is going to be an upset is because, Trump did perform a lot better here in 2024. Trump only lost the state by 6 points when the polls were kind of reflecting something different. Yes, New Jersey has come to the right some, but not by that much. New Jersey's going to be a swing state is a Republican narrative that I don't think is really going to come to fruition. And my third point here, I think I kind of already covered this. There's not going to be another 6-point polling error here. 2021 was a completely different political environment. Biden was he was an unpopular president at the time. We were coming out of COVID. Phil Murphy, who was the incumbent governor running for re-election in 2021, was deeply unpopular. He shut down the state. There's tax policy that he was unpopular on. But people have said that he was kind of a failed governor, even on the Democratic side. And Mickey Sherrill, who's the Democratic nominee, has run away from the incumbent governor, like not really holding many rallies with him. So she actually has been pretty politically savvy and kind of distancing herself and running on her own campaign. And that's what she needs to do because Jack is a strong candidate. She's kind of running as this more generic moderate Democrat. She didn't endorse Mamdani. She's trying to stay as far away from him as possible. And my last point here is I think this is going to be a repeat of the 2022 New York governor's race. The political environment was different. New York is probably a 4 or 5 point more bluer state than New Jersey is, but it was similar in that there was a very strong Republican candidate. Lee Zeldin's kind of a more moderate Republican, kind of like Jack. They're like both seen as these very strong candidates that could, win the independent vote. And Jack is absolutely going to win the independent vote in New Jersey. But unlike 2021, people there's a lot of attention being drawn to this race. The Democrats didn't invest any money in New Jersey in 2021 when it was 51 to 48, and the Republican outperformed the polls. That's not going to happen again. The the Democrats realized the mistake that they made in 2021 by almost losing this race, and they're pumping money. President Obama held a rally for Mickey Sherrill, and so that's why I think you're going to get a +6 margin. Some people are saying that Mickey Sherrill is going to win by a lower margin. I think she actually has more upside here. I could see her winning by 7, 8, 9 points here. I think people are overthinking this race too much. And the last point here is the Real Clear Politics average is bogus. This 3 points is just completely wrong. It's filled with Atlas Intel, in like the Trafalgar groups. Like, if you take the high quality polling average, and Nate Silver did this, you get to around a 5 to 6 point margin, which is outside the margin of error. And I think Mickey Sherrill might overperform by a point or two based on that high quality polling average. Okay, last up, we're going to cover the Virginia races, and I kind of combine them here. So the Virginia governor's race, there hasn't been a lot of attention here. I don't think it's going to be that competitive. No one really does. There's this thing called the Virginia curse, where Virginia on the state level, the year after the presidential election, because that's how it always happens, 2017, 2021, 2025, they typically always vote the opposite of what the president's party is. And the only exception for this was in 2013, but I think this is going to happen again. Unlike New Jersey, where Mickey Sherrill is kind of a meh, average candidate, Spanberger is the far better candidate. Sears, the Republican running, even though she's the incumbent lieutenant governor who won in 2021, to her credit, I think purely on Glenn Youngkin's coattails, Trump hasn't even endorsed her. Trump wants to stay as far away from this race because he knows that Abigail Spanberger is going to win. So, but why Virginia is still interesting and worth covering is because this attorney general's race is very competitive. I kind of threw this together last minute because it's been a busy day here in New York City on Election Day. We have a big live stream coming up. But the attorney general's race is very interesting because of this texting scandal that Jay Jones had. I'm not going to go into all the details, but it was pretty scandalous. He was advocating for political violence. It was very, very bad. However, how much split ticket voting do we think that there will be? Historically, we've seen less and less split ticket voting. 2024, North Carolina was an exception when there was about a 20% or maybe even more split ticket voting between Mark Robinson, the Republican governor candidate, and Trump. I mean, that was a scandal. I mean, maybe you would argue it's on the same level as this Jay Jones scandal. I think it was probably a bit worse. But I just think that 11 points of split ticket voting, which I'm projecting here, is a lot. I think Jay Jones gets over the finish line. You can see it's around 50-50. I think the reason for this is because if they broke out the polls into who had already voted versus who's going to vote on Election Day, the people that had already voted, they said that, Jones was winning those voters by like 20 points. And when they polled the people that had not yet voted but were planning on voting, Jason B. Yoris, who's the incumbent Republican attorney general, was doing a lot better. But since that texting scandal has come out, I think we've seen a little bit of momentum for Jay Jones. He was at this rally with President Obama. People were speculating that he was going to drop out, that the Democrats were going to abandon him. Well, he isn't killing it. No pun intended there. He is doing well enough, I think that Spanberger, with her coattails, drags him across the finish line here. All right, guys, I got to run to this Kalshi live stream that I'm really excited to do tonight, but please let me know what your thoughts, comments on this. I'm not going to edit it, so apologies for this being a bit rough. We had a couple of typos here, but please let me know what you think of my predictions here, and lock in, guys. I feel good about the Democratic sweep, so let's go.